right? The other thing I see on packaged foods now all the time is plant-based. And it just has
Yeah,
to make me
right.
laugh, right? Because it's like, well, sometimes, yes, it can be, right? Like plant-based means something, but it's not, plant-based is not defined as an actual term, right? So
Right.
people can put plant-based if there is refined wheat in the product, right? So
Right.
like it comes from a plant at some point down the line, right? But it doesn't make it healthy.
It's the Health in the Real World podcast. It's time to start the show with Chris Janke as your host. Here to give you everything that you need when it comes to fitness strategies. We keep it simple and easy. It's your roadmap to get healthy. You don't need equipment and you don't need a gym. Just the right strategies to get you fit and trim.
Hi, my name is Dr. Carrie Heeneman. I'm the founder of Family Meals First. I provide daily nutrition facts and tips. Come learn with us on Instagram at Family Meals First.
Hello and welcome to Health in the Real World. I'm Chris Janke, joined today by Carrie Heeneman, who has been a guest, I believe, 2 other times, right, Carrie? Once one-on-one, and then you were in the group conversation. Well, welcome back.
Thank you. I love chatting with you. So thank you for having me back.
You're welcome. You're welcome. So quick introduction for people who maybe didn't see those first 2 episodes, who you are, what you're up to, and then we'll get rolling from there.
So my name is Carrie Heeneman. I'm a mom of 4 and I have a PhD in nutrition. And I am passionate about educating parents and people in general about how to feed themselves and their families well. There is a ton of misinformation out there. And I feel like, especially with social media, it's hard to know where you can go to find accurate information and relevant information and who you can really trust.
Yeah. So for the average, and that's actually the direction we're going to go with this episode, is misinformation in the nutrition world. I think this is huge because I don't think nutrition is that complicated, yet we have 42,000 different ways to be healthy. So what are some things that pop, to the top of your head about ways that we've been misinformed with nutrition?
I mean, so the biggest one for me is that everybody eats, right? So therefore, everybody feels like because they eat, they are an expert. And I see it all the time. My business is on Instagram mainly, and I see it all the time where people are giving advice based on their own experience, right?
Yes.
And that is helpful to an extent, right? Like we all ask friends for advice and want to know like what has happened. But when you have someone on Instagram who you don't even know, you don't know how relevant their situation is to your situation, it can often be misleading, right? And just because you have one experience does not make you an expert in the area, right? That I am still always learning nutrition and I'm passionate about it, but I went to school for 9 years and then I did a postdoc for another 2 years. So I studied it for a really long time, right?
And
so
you're
someone
still
that just eats.
And you're still learning.
All the time, right? Because nutrition science in particular is somewhat in its infancy, right? Like for a long time, it was not regarded as a science. We like go back, thousands of years. Hippocrates said like food is thy medicine, right? But as far as the medical world, nutrition was not really regarded as important for the last 200 years, right?
Yeah.
Like, it was more about preventing malnutrition than it was about optimal health. And that focus has really shifted from malnutrition to optimal health really in the last 50 years. So if you think about it that way, like the other sciences like chemistry and biology and physics, right? Like we are still using the same formulas that were developed in like the first century, right?
Yeah, exactly.
So there's just so much to learn.
That's a good point about that. A couple things pop into my mind. One is that the medical system is built on a symptoms-driven approach. So if you have no symptoms, you don't need to go to the doctor. Like one of my doctors, he said that your symptom is your ticket into the office. If you have no symptom, you have no ticket, you can't be admitted. There's no reason, right?
Yes.
So it's not about optimization. And then secondly, I do agree with you that I would say a lot of medical doctors and just the whole medical establishment does agree with you that nutrition is important, but even now they don't teach it, or at least one of my best friends is a medical doctor, and I think they got like a month of nutrition in medical school, and it might not have even been that much. So lot of misinformation out there based on all this. Even medical doctors are, misinformed, as good as their intentions are. So what are some things that you see people doing, these nutrition experts who are only nutrition experts because they eat, what are they doing that you go, ooh,
Yeah, just want to quickly touch base again about doctors. Doctors are amazing, but in all honesty, they have so many things that they have to do in their checkup, like pediatricians, for example, right? Nutrition is part of what they do on a daily basis. But in that appointment, right, they've also got to hit the child's weight, and they've got to check for growth things and all these different things, right? So that it's also a time issue, right? Yeah. And then they're not getting the education because they have to learn about so many other things. So like anything, we just can't know.
We can't know everything. Yeah.
But as far as the misinformation goes, the thing that I see the most is that people will recommend products that they know very little about. I come across all the products all the time, right? On top of being into nutrition and food, I also just really love to grocery shop. It is very soothing for me. So I love to go, if I can find a few minutes, which these days is not very often. I love to go to the grocery store and check out new products and read labels and learn more about it. But there are, a ton of new products out there that haven't been studied, and a ton of new ingredients out there. So just because you like the taste of a product doesn't mean it's necessarily healthy. And I see people confusing that a lot of the time, that like, oh, I like this product, it's really good for you, right? But there's no basis behind that, right? Like just because you like the taste of a product doesn't make it healthy for you, right? And on top of it, food companies and advertising are a multi-million-dollar business, right? So, and for food companies, the objective is to get more people to buy their products. And, big part of what I promote is eating more fruits, vegetables, whole grains, things that ultimately are not going to make companies any money, right? Now, that being said, as we both know, like we are both parents of lots of kids, right? And the reality is, as much as I would like to feed my children organic, fresh fruits and vegetables every single day for every single meal, like, last night we were on the pool deck for water polo until 8:00, and I still had to feed my kids and get them to bed, right?
Yeah.
So on nights like that, I have to reach for some processed things. So for me, it's really important that I make smart choices when I do that, rather than just saying like, oh, we're just going to swing through McDonald's on the way home, right? Like I'm going to have things in my refrigerator and my freezer that are good products that are processed, but they're minimally processed, and they have good ingredients that I recognize that are going to help me get a semi-homemade meal on the table that doesn't have preservatives and chemicals and nasty ingredients in it.
Nice. I like that concept of semi-homemade. So what does somebody look for in a product? So the first misinformation is, I like the product, therefore it's good for me. What are some different criteria we can use to like the product instead of just how it tastes? What should people look for?
Nobody wants to hear this, but the best thing you can do is to read the ingredients. It can be overwhelming. I know last time we talked about yogurt, right? But now the newest thing is milk, right? Like you go to the milk aisle and there's 50 different plant milks. And because it's plant milk, it should be healthy, right? But a lot of those plant milks have a ton of random chemicals in them, right? So again, flip it over and look at the ingredients. It is worth your time. That is going to make the biggest difference. And if there's an ingredient that you don't recognize, it's probably a chemical. Not always. There are a couple of things, like ascorbic acid is vitamin C, and they use that as a preservative a lot. And vitamin C is fine. It's but there are a lot of chemicals that they sneak into foods just because.
Yeah. What are some of the biggest ones?
The chemicals that one thing that I'm really not a fan of is artificial sweeteners. And you find that in a lot of foods that are touted as health foods, right? Because they're trying to reduce the calories and keep those, as a consumer, food companies are always trying to target consumers and hit the notes of salty, sweet, and fat, right? So anytime food producers can hit those same notes with keeping the caloric value low, they're going to do it. So one of the ways they do it is something that they call non-nutritive sweeteners, or we know it better as artificial sweeteners, right? Yeah. So that's something that I see in all the time. And sometimes even like stevia and monk fruit, right? Those are often in products. And those are more natural forms of artificial sweeteners, right? They're not chemicals like sucralose or NutraSweet, but there's still not a lot known about it, right? So personally, when I'm feeding my kids, I try to buy products that don't have those ingredients in it because I don't know, right? And at the end of the day, we all know that sugar is something we want to reduce, right? So ultimately, it's better to give your kids a small amount of something sweetened with maple syrup or maybe a dash of honey. I prefer maple syrup personally, just, protecting the bees. But then rather than using an artificial sweetener, which is, not only potentially harmful, but it also messes with their taste buds, right? And so you're giving them getting them used to that artificially sweet taste, and then it makes it harder for them to lower their overall sugar intake.
Right. Yeah, I always thought it was funny. The calorie is such a bad word, right? It's like, fewer calories. But you're right. They want to hit that sweet, salty, and fat, and you can't get sweet. Well, you can now, I guess, but you shouldn't want to get sweet without calories. Like that's sugar. It's like sweet as sugar. It's honey and maple syrup, like you said. And those are carbohydrates, and that is calories. Same thing with fat. Those are calories, and it's tricky, right? But yes, if you do shop a lot of prepackaged foods, and like you said, sometimes life happens and you don't have time. Sometimes you have to give the kids mac and cheese, and it is what it is. But
we may or may not be having that for dinner tonight.
Yes, us too. But I actually heard I read an article by a Stanford nutritionist, and she said her son, I think, is now 25 years old. And when he was a kid, she just decided, you know what? I'm going to stop the food fights. I'm just going to let him eat what he wants within reason. And now he grew up and he's, he eats healthy and it's no big deal. So that's another thing. We don't have to necessarily force feed our kids broccoli through a tube if they don't want it. The taste buds will develop when they're ready.
Yeah, I mean, that's another interesting thing. I mean, research study after research study after research study shows that it takes kids like 8 to 13 times to develop a taste for new flavor. So, if you think about that, and I mean, just personally, right? Like there are things, mushrooms is something that like, I know they are super healthy for me, but I just mentally have a hard time with them. The texture and the taste, I don't like it. Right. And so, and if you think about it that way, like, it's not really fair that we're forcing mushrooms on our kids, right? Like there are things that we all dislike. So, to speak on that note, it's important that you consistently provide healthy options, but the definition of healthy is a broad category, right? So
you froze. Carrie, can you hear me? Oh, there we go.
I'm back.
Okay. Okay. You said the definition of healthy is a broad category is the last thing I heard.
Okay. So the definition of healthy is a broad category. So broccoli, right? In our house, we eat it once a week because I have 2 kids that like it, 2 that don't, but I have for other things, right? So there's a wide variety of things that are healthy. It doesn't have to be just broccoli and kale, right? Or mushrooms.
Yep.
And sometimes, I think too, we get focused on it has to only be vegetables, right? My kid eats fruit, but they don't eat vegetables. Again, like I keep offering them, but fruit is healthy too, right? And if your kid is going to eat fruit and it's naturally sweet, so it's more palatable for kids, that's okay, right? We're expanding their palate. And I mean, we're always expanding our palate as adults, right? I mean, I remember the first time I had coffee, right? And I was like,
oh, so gross at first, right? Yeah.
I mean, now my kids know before we do anything in the morning, I have to have
Right. Yeah, that's a good, coffee's one for me too. Onions. I used to absolutely hate onions. Now I like them. Mushrooms, peppers, different things. Yeah, that are just very hard for a lot of kids. But you're right. We're constantly expanding our palates little by little. I think that's one big thing. What about, okay, so let's go back to the misinformation, because I think this is good. Any misinformation around children's food specifically?
Yeah, I mean, so there are lots of issues with children's food. Like one, fun advertising, right? That and now I see it on healthier choices as well, which is kind of frustrating. I mean, the thing that is funny to me is like Cheerios, right? There's plain Cheerios and there's honey nut Cheerios, right? And plain Cheerios have a little bit of sugar in them, but it's something my kids like. We, eat that on occasion because it's an easy snack and it's minimally processed, right?
Yeah.
But when I go through to the grocery store to buy the plain Cheerios, right? Like they don't ever have a fun picture. Right?
Nope. There's no flying
The honey
bee on the
nut
front.
and the chocolate one and the fruit flavored one are always like cartoon pictures. My youngest is now 7, so I don't have really little kids anymore. But even he's like, Mom, why aren't we getting this one? Right.
Right. They love the cartoon.
Buddy.
Yeah. I'm kind of with you with shopping. Like I actually really like shopping in the grocery store without children with me. Because when they're with me, I want that. And of course, everything they want has a cartoon character on it. And the cartoon character is usually advertising the one with like 25 grams of sugar per serving. It's just horrible.
Yeah. I mean, it just like, and at the end of the day, it's hard to tell your kid that is a treat, right? That because it's cereal, right? And they see all this marketing and advertising that cereal's fortified, right? So when a food is fortified, it means that they are adding nutrients in it, right? So cereal is often fortified with a lot of vitamins and minerals. So, advertisers tout that, right? And that doesn't mean like in some cases, fortified cereal can be a great source of iron, right? So occasionally that's fine. I choose to get it from plain Cheerios rather than honey nut Cheerios because I don't need the sugar. And that's, again, going back to reading the labels, right?
Yeah.
Like you can use some of these packaged foods to not only make it more convenient, but also occasionally boost your nutrition, right? Like my youngest does not like to eat meat. So I'm constantly trying to get iron in him. So for me, plain Cheerios are a good way to kind of sneak in a little bit of iron because those iron pills are really unpalatable, right? I mean, it just, and all sorts of complications with that. So, I don't give it to him all the time, but occasionally I do give him that cereal, right? Because it's a good way. But again, the difference between plain Cheerios and honey nut Cheerios is huge. There's a lot of added sugar.
Yeah. Would you say, so for the average person that you work with, are people for the most part like pretty close to hitting the mark, or are there any like misinformation that a lot of people still have that's just like we're way off, we're not even close?
I mean, yes and no. I think the good thing is that we have access to so much information every single day, right? So I think that's a positive thing. But I still think that like it's so hard because they're constantly sneaking ingredients into things and trying to tout things as healthy, right? One of the things that currently drives me nuts, it used to be paleo and now it's keto, right? And I see a lot of people that are like, keto is healthy, right? And I'm not villainizing keto. I'm not villainizing honey nut Cheerios. Like all of these things have a place, but the reality is that like ketosis is a altered state of health, right? Like when you put your body into ketosis, your brain is not running on the fuel that it needs optimally, right? Your brain needs glucose to run. And when you're in ketosis, your brain is running on ketones, which it can do. But, they say when you're switching over to a keto diet, you might have brain fog and things. And this is because your brain is switching fuels. It likes to run on glucose, not ketones, right? So there's a time and a place for these diets. And I think they're showing over time that for some people, going on a keto diet might help them because it's restrictive, right? And it helps give them guidelines. But keto in itself is not healthy. So if you go to the grocery store and there's a package of keto acceptable Oreo cookies,
right,
it's not healthy because it says keto on it, right? And I think a lot of people, again, they're like, oh, but it's okay for the keto diet, so it's okay, it's healthy, right? And I think it's that marketing trick is really old, but it changes all the time. So as a consumer,
so it seems new, right? It seems new, like, oh well, this must be the magic bullet. Wasn't keto originally developed as like a cancer treatment or like a cancer diet or diabetes diet or something? Like it's
used for a variety of different things. Sometimes for kids with epilepsy. So a bunch of different yes, it has a place, right? That, and like I said, I mean, I am a big believer that like nothing is off limits, no foods are bad, right? But And, another thing is I promote all these fruits and vegetables, right? The other thing I see on packaged foods now all the time is plant-based. And it just has to make me laugh, right? Because it's like, well, sometimes, yes, it can be, right? Like plant-based means something, but it's not, plant-based is not defined as an actual term, right? So people can put plant-based if there is refined wheat in the product, right? So like it comes from a plant at some point down the line, right? But it doesn't make it healthy.
Right. And that's a really good point, actually, because food labels, I think the FDA has done a fairly decent job at regulating. However, like you can't put organic on something unless it actually is organic, and there's a certification process. But you're right, there's not a certification process to put the words plant-based. You could put plant-based, healthy, keto, paleo. You can put all these terms. Nobody's gonna hold you to it, right?
It's so true. And to be totally honest, even when they do make a violation, it can sometimes take months to years for that violation to be caught, right? Because we're all human, right? So, and packaging on food is changing all the time. So, a smaller company puts a false claim on the food. It can take a while for it to get caught. So, again, like you are your best source of making smart decisions. Like you are the one that has to, it takes time, and I get it. And it's even more aggravating when I go to the grocery store and they have, because they also like to do this, they've switched up where the foods are. So now I've got to like look in different locations, and that takes more time, and there's no time. I get all those things, but if you can find the time and try and make that the priority, that is the best way to be healthy.
Yeah. Now they make you walk through the Oreo aisle to get to the fruits and vegetables.
I know. Right. It's always something. That was something I was just discussing the other day. Like, if something is in the produce section, is it healthy, right? Because now there's this whole like quote unquote nuts or energy balls or section.
Right.
And some of those things are fantastic, right? But some of them are glorified candy bar. But they're in the produce section, and you're told to shop the perimeter and go to the produce section, right? So if it's in the produce section, it should be healthy. But
yeah, smart grocery owner would just say, well, if they're only shopping the perimeter, let me take some of the stuff from the middle and just move it out, and
it's got the word healthy on the label. So, and it comes from plants at some point. So,
So with all this information and obviously buying just raw fruit, raw vegetables, buying, if you're doing whole grain, say like buying the actual rice that you have to cook yourself. How much have you taken it to the next step? Like, do you do gardening? Do you grow your own fruits and vegetables? How much of that would you recommend people do?
I get it. We're all busy, right? Again, we've talked about how we have 4 kids. Some days like my husband and I joke about this, right? Like I get the stainless steel water bottles that are super pricey, and I don't need to do because we've got free tap water, right? But some days I feel like I don't have time to even fill up my water bottle because I'm just running so much, right? And I know that everybody is in the same boat. Like today's day and age is super busy, right? So we garden. Does most of our produce come from the garden? No. Like it's more of an experience for my kids. And I'll be honest right now, our garden this year, half of it was super successful and half of it just is like a desert waste.
Mm-hmm.
we need to get back to, right? So, we do it. The reality is for me now, I know lots of families that are passionate about gardening, and so if you can do it, great, right? Like, I really think gardening is a great way to get kids involved. I have been more successful. We have an indoor garden that comes with pods that are kind of like a Keurig coffee pod, right? And I grow greens through there. And that's actually fantastic because occasionally I'll see the kids nibbling on it, which is super fun, right? Like an unexpected, whereas the garden is outside. So it's a little more of an investment for them to go out there. But sometimes after school, they're hungry and they'll be like, oh, that looks really pretty. I might try it. So nice. There's lots of different ways you can garden, right? Gardening doesn't have to be, I think that is another thing that we do to ourselves as parents or just as consumers in this day and age. Like if it's not perfect, then I shouldn't do it, right? Like I'm not worthy, but there are a lot of different ways. We are currently trying to just have cactuses in the house, and one has already imploded because of molds.
Oh gosh.
We keep trying, right? And my kids are growing things and they're learning about caring for things and where our foods come from and how much work goes into that, and appreciation for farmers and all of that. So,
Nice.
My kind of rule of thumb is I try to cook as much as possible from home, but I kind of, I feel like for me, I set the bar at 50%. If I can do from scratch food 50% of the time, I feel like, you know what, I'm doing a good job. And the rest of the time I'm making smart choices, right? So in our house, I always do a fresh fruit with breakfast. I do a fresh fruit and vegetable lunch and a fresh fruit and vegetable for dinner, right?
Perfect.
And then the main dish sometimes is from scratch meal, sometimes it's a semi-homemade meal. It just depends.
Nice.
So, and I know some people that can get that closer to 100%. And like I said, I mean, that is my ideal. But for me personally, I'm running the fine line between my own mental health and providing a healthy environment for my kids. And to be honest, as a whole, like they eat pretty well. We, I'm able to, I buy packaged lettuce, so that's another way to kind of convenience. I don't have to deal with a whole head of lettuce and the dirt and everything. We buy baby carrots. I don't always, but little things like that are easy ways to incorporate things that are, it's semi-processed, right?
Yeah.
So that's another thing I feel like processed gets a bad name.
Yes.
And now they've kind of coined this new term because processed was getting a bad name because things like, oatmeal, right? Like slow cooking oatmeal is processed to some degree, right? It's not the actual kernel, right? But the new thing that you want to look out for is ultra processed food. So that's when we're looking at things like ice cream and donuts and things like that with a lot of preservatives and things.
Right. Makes sense. I like that distinction because sometimes it can really be beneficial to have something that's almost fully made and then you just sort of combine it with a few other healthy things and then you have something that's pretty good. It's pretty healthy.
Yeah, I mean, pasta sauce is another one, right? There's a wide range of pasta sauces and there's a wide range of health, degree of health from these different types of pasta sauce. But we have brands that I like that doesn't have any chemicals in that, sometimes I do make my own pasta sauce, but some nights I, do a jar of pasta sauce with a whole wheat pasta, right? And yes, it is a processed meal, but that's infinitely better than me going through a fast food restaurant on the way home, right?
Yep.
Especially when I pair it with, a frozen vegetable. That's another thing that's processed, but essentially intact. Pair it with a frozen vegetable. And then I buy like those bags of 3 pounds of apples and I slice up some apples. And we've got a super easy dinner, but it's super fast, right? By the time I either DoorDash or go and order it, it doesn't take me that much more time. And the cost, which is another thing I think people, eating healthy can get so expensive, but there are tricks that you can do to make it healthier.
Yes, absolutely. 100%. Well, it's great. I think you took a lot of pressure off people's shoulders too. I like that. I like the 50% rule for yourself. And that's good advice. Carrie, how do people get in touch with you to learn more about working with you or any resources you have online?
Yeah. So the best ways to find me is to follow me on Instagram at Family Meals First. So we're growing every day. And on Instagram, I provide daily nutrition facts and tips. So it's a great way to kind of quickly learn more about nutrition. And then I also have a website at www.familymealsfirst.com that people can check me out as well.
Perfect. Well, thank you so much, Carrie. Again, this is Carrie Hieneman. I'm Chris Janke on Health in the Real World. Carrie, thanks for joining me again today.
Thanks, Chris. It's always great to chat with you.
Thanks for listening to the Health in the Real World show. Make sure to like and subscribe and comment down below. Visit mycorebalance.com to learn more.